And we will go ahead and get started. So we've got the recorded starting here, and I'm going to share my screen. Now, while I'm in the process of sharing my screen, have you ladies already done chapter 3 in, I believe we're in fundamentals?
I believe so.
I think so.
Okay, it's starting the broadcast. Perfect. All right, we've got the broadcast started. Fundamentals, chapter 3, Physiology and Histology of the Skin. This is a really good chapter for estheticians. So if you have not already done the full process in the Boss Lady Beauty online, I highly recommend you do it right after the call. Read through the chapter, get a little more information, because it's such a big chapter. There's no way we're going to be able to do it all in an hour. It's a lot, but I really wanted to spend a little time talking about the physiology and the histology of the skin, specifically what those two words mean. And I want to take a little time to talk about the layers of the skin, which we're going to talk about, as well as distinguishing the 6 primary functions of the skin. If you understand those two concepts comfortably, meaning you can talk to those concepts in your mind to a client when thinking about what products to use, when a client tells you what's going on, if you can comprehend those 2 points, then you are going to be a lot further along as far as gaining that confidence, gaining that skill when it comes to working in skincare. So, Physiology and Histology of the Skin, Fundamentals, Chapter 3. When you do this chapter as a whole, the learning objectives are as follows. You're going to describe why learning the physiology and histology of the skin makes you a better esthetician, and it does, in fact, make you a better esthetician. Describes the attributes of healthy skin. If you have pen and paper, I want you to write these down or take a screenshot of my screen right now, because when I tell you this is good stuff. Describe the attributes of healthy skin. How can you identify unhealthy skin or unhealthy behaviors if you can't describe what healthy skin looks like, feels like? Next, distinguish the 6 primary functions of the skin. We're going to focus on that this call. Explain the functions of each layer of the skin from the deepest to the surface. We're going to talk about that in detail on this call. We're gonna, in this chapter, you're going to learn to identify a hair follicle and its appendages of the skin. Identify nails as an appendage of the skin. Describe the functions of the 2 types of nerves located within the skin. Explain what is produced by the 2 types of glands in the skin. And then distinguish the factors influencing skin health. So 2 and 9 are going to work, in tandem with each other. Understanding what makes healthy skin and being able to distinguish the influencing factors of that health, you are going to be way more confident after doing this chapter. So I encourage you, jump right into it when we're done. Spend some time, read the full chapter, write down some questions so that when we do a part 2 to this call and we go into the deeper information, you'll have a better understanding of the basics and be able to ask more advanced questions. So, describe why learning the physiology and histology of the skin makes you a better esthetician. Estheticians have an opportunity to study a most fascinating science. That science is skin histology and physiology. Understand that as an esthetician, you have an understanding of science when it comes to the skin. Those sciences are called skin histology and skin physiology. This involves studying the anatomy of the layers, functions of the skin. If you haven't already, in chapter 2, you defined physiology as the study of the functions and activities performed by the body structures, including both physical and chemical processes. While histology is also known as microscopic anatomy, which is the study of the structure and composition of tissue. So in tandem, skin physiology and histology involves the study of the structure and composition of the skin tissue. These are the foundational sciences that estheticians need to have a solid grasp on before caring for the skin. So just as a recap, skin physiology, study of the function and activities performed by the body structures, including physical and chemical processes. Histology, also known as microscopic anatomy, study of the structure and the composition, of the tissues. Without those two things, there's no way to understand how the skin works and why things happen the way that they do. Really, once you know the reason, things like acne, dark spots, sun lines, sun damage, wrinkles, once you understand how the body, how the layers of the skin, how the physical and chemical processes take place, then you can understand how to guide your client in one, correction when appropriate, and two, maintenance to avoid those things happening in the first place. Once you know those, you're going to be good to go. So I'm not going to spend too much time on describing the attributes of healthy skin because I want to get to the 6 functions and the layers of each function. But just as a quick recap, the skin or the integumentary system is the largest organ in the body. It is a strong barrier designed to protect us from the outside elements. The skin's layers, nerves, cellular functions, hair follicles, and glands all work together harmoniously to regulate and protect the body. Hormones, growth factors, and other biochemicals control the skin's intricate functions. To break that down into everyday conversation, the integumentary system, the skin, largest organ in the body, meaning we need that organ to maintain a normal, happy, healthy function living life, right? We cannot live life without the skin because it is designed to protect us and our other organs from the outside environment. The stronger the integrity of the skin, the stronger it is at protecting our internal organs and our internal systems from outside elements. So the reason we have skin is not for vanity. The reason we have skin is so that it can perform its natural functions and work harmoniously with the body to not only regulate things like temperature, sweat production, releasing, but also to protect the body from outside influences like UV radiation, heat, all kinds of things. So it's important to understand that although the beauty of the skin is a factor that brings us our clients, the skin has a much larger role to play in our overall health. If you can respect that, understand how that works, you'll be good to go. So the basic material and building blocks for our body's tissues are proteins. This is more than likely going to be on your state board. I would write that down if you haven't. The basic material and building blocks for our body's tissues are proteins. Amino acids are the building blocks of those proteins, and amino acids form peptides, and peptides form the protein. Proteins have many roles in maintaining skin health. Our skin is an industrious manufacturer with miles or kilometers of blood vessels, millions of sweat glands, an array of nerves within a network of fibers. The appendages of the skin include the hair, the nails, the sweat glands, and the oil glands. Healthy skin, I would also write this down. Healthy skin is slightly moist, it is soft, smooth, and somewhat acidic. Earlier in this section, it talked about the skin being the organ, the integumentary system being harmonious with the other body functions, right? Harmonious. So in order to create harmonious skin health, if that's happening, the skin will be slightly moist, soft to the touch, smooth to the touch, and somewhat acidic. When you're performing a skin analysis, the touch, the feel, the way it looks, all of those things are visual cues for you to determine if it's moist, soft, smooth. You can't tell if it's somewhat acidic based on, touch or anything like that, but ultimately that's what you're performing in a skin analysis, and that's why it's important to do so. So before we continue into the 6 primary functions of the skin, do either one of you guys have any questions?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Perfect,
Okay.
perfect. All righty, let's move on to the primary functions of the skin. I would absolutely write these down. We want to know these 6 primary functions. I'll read this quick expert and then we will relist the primary functions if you didn't catch them. So the skin is similar to a multifunction tool. It acts as a shield for the body. It is waterproof and an insulator that protects the body against extreme heat, cold, and damaging UV rays. Skin is a barrier that protects against harmful chemicals and bacteria while preventing infection. The skin plays an important role in bone health by producing vitamin D. And in addition, our skin is a huge sensory storehouse that keeps our brain in touch with the world around us. Skin does all of this while being flexible enough for the body to engage in motion while maintaining a healthy exterior to allow us to look good and feel comfortable. For these reasons, the 6 primary functions of the skin are sensation, protection, heat regulation, excretion, secretion, and absorption. I'm going to say those again. If you are typing or writing these down, please write them down now. If not, grab a quick screenshot. You want to be able to point out these 6 primary functions at any time. Sensation. Sorry, I'm going to let the ambulance pass. That's fun. 1, sensation. 2, protection. 3, heat regulation. 4, excretion. 5, secretion. And 6, absorption. Now, does anyone think that any of these are more important than the other? Anybody feel that one is more important than the other when it comes to the primary functions of the skin?
No.
No, I agree. I don't think so either. But what have we talked about so far that would solidify the fact that neither one of these is more important than the other? Anything stuck out to you to make you identify or be able to speak to the fact that none of these are more important than the other? I'm gonna go to it so you can see it. I'm gonna read this sentence for you again. Skin layers, nerves, cellular functions, hair follicles, and glands all work together harmoniously to regulate and protect the body. We need all 6 of these functions to be performing at their optimal levels in order for our bodies to work harmoniously, or our integumentary system to work harmoniously with the other systems of our body. What does that tell you?
They all have to work together to work properly.
Excellent. And if one of them is not working well or not performing in a way that it should, or is being affected by an external or internal factor, what does that look like? What happens?
Sorry, trying to plug my computer.
No worries.
Guys.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what that looks like. When that's happening, when any of these functions aren't doing what it is that they should do at their optimal level, that's when the client comes to us and says, I have a problem. So that's your first key right there. If a client comes to you and they says, I'm just here for relaxation, my skin looks great, it feels great, I don't have any problems, I'm here to relax, I'm running away from my family this Mother's Day, then more than likely, their primary functions of their integumentary system are doing great. We're good. We're just there to keep them zen. They want to enjoy the music. They like the way the products feel, smell, and how they affect their skin. But the minute someone comes to us and says, I have acne, I have these dark spots, I have this, I have that, one of these primary functions somewhere along the line has gone haywire. It's not doing what it's supposed to do, or it didn't do what it's supposed to do. And now the client is seeing a visual representation of that of that issue. It's a visual representation of the skin not functioning the way that it should. So when a client comes in with a problem, as an esthetician, your tools are the products, the types of services that you use. So products meaning the ingredients in the products that you have available to you. Different products are going to different ingredients are going to benefit the skin different ways. But you also have different treatment types. Microderms and chemical peels achieve different results. You can do a massage to stimulate the skin. You can do a massage to calm the skin. Treatments and products are going to be the tools that you use to correct or improve, correct and improve are the same thing, to correct or prevent the negative impact of these primary functions not doing their job. But in order for you to make the determination of which ingredients or products, tools, or service that you need to use, you have to identify how the primary function or which primary function would have been impacted to produce the negative effect that the client is seeing. Does that make sense to everyone? If it doesn't make sense, say so. Perfect. Let's break down each one of these 6 primary functions. So first here we've got sensation. Touch is one of the first senses to develop. The nerve fibers in the skin sense when we are touched. Depending on the type of stimulation, sensations felt on our skin cause us to feel, react, or move. Different nerve sensors help us to detect different sensations and perceive changes in our environment, such as heat, cold, touch, pain, and pressure. Nerve sensors send messages to the brain, and motor nerves send messages back to relay the body how to respond. The sensation of heat will cause us to pull away from a hot stove burner, while a message sends messages to the brain through nerve stimulation and lower stress in the body, as well as promote circulation. Studies have shown stress reduction in babies and older adults when they experience more touch and interaction with others. Sensory nerve fibers are most abundant in the fingertips and are designed to be one of the most sensitive parts of our body. So when it comes to sensation helps us detect different or perceive changes in our environment, such as heat, cold, touch, pain, and pressure. When dealing with sensation in the skin, typically you're going to be doing facials. Sometimes you'll work on the back of the body, sometimes you'll work on the décolleté, depending on the client, but for the most part, you're talking about the chin and up or the neck and up. Well, if a client is experiencing, they're not reacting to a product that's meant to heat the skin or a product that's meant to cool the skin, for example, ice globes. You're doing ice globes around the eyes in order to depuff the eyes, and you notice that the client is not feeling the cold, they're not feeling that sensation, or they require a lot of pressure. That could be a sign that there's something going on with their nerves and sensation. They may be losing sensation in the skin, which can then trigger you as an esthetician to, 1, monitor that over a course of treatment, and 2, maybe the client is experiencing or has experienced something like a stroke, right? And that stroke affected their nerves in their skin. You have to be able to look at the client's skin over the course of treatments, as well as look at the client's skin over the course of what they've told you, to make determinations like, oh, you know what, they might be having some nerve damage in or around this zone of their face. Now, I'm going to preface that by saying sensation can be tricky because you can't diagnose the client. We're not medical professionals, so we can't tell the client, have you ever had a stroke? Or it looks like you may be experiencing strokes. We can't do that, right? That's way beyond our scope of practice. Liability wise, that would get you in so much trouble. Never do that. But what you can do is bring the client's attention to it. You can bring the client's attention to the fact that, they're they're not as susceptible to cold or heat, or the pressure that you have to use to stimulate the skin is much heavier than, you know, the average, blah, 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 and notify them that based on your findings, you would recommend them see a physician for X, Y, or Z. It's also important to note these things down in your client's chart so that if there are changes, albeit subtle or major changes from one service to the next, that you are noting, you know, how those changes are taking place. The next primary function of the skin is going to be protection. The skin is a thin yet strong protective barrier to outside elements and microorganisms. It has many defense mechanisms to protect the body from injury and invasion. Sebum, which is oil, if you do not know this, write it down. This is a word that will be used on your state board. Sebum, or oil, on the epidermis gives protection from external factors such as invasion by certain bacteria. To summarize that last statement, the oilier the skin surface, so the more sebum, let's use our proper term here, the more sebum on the surface of the skin, so on the epidermis, then the more protection that person has from external factors such as invasion by certain bacteria. The oilier the skin, the harder it is for them to be negatively impacted by outside influences. But you have to maintain that natural balance so that it does not create things like excess acne by the oil sitting and the bacteria collecting on the skin to create that. So oil is not a bad thing. You'll see, for the most part, a lot of people fight against oil. They do not want to be oily. It is annoying to maintain a lot of oil on the skin. It affects your makeup, it affects your day-to-day. But oil is actually beneficial to the skin surface, and it really does help keep a youthful appearance. So when it comes to sebum, the focus really should be balance, not removing the amount of oil present on the epidermis. So the acid mantle, again, that's going to be an important word for you. You're going to use that throughout your career, right? The acid mantle is the protective barrier made up of sebum, lipids, sweats, and water. So write down acid mantle if you haven't already. Your acid mantle is the protective barrier, and it is made up of sebum, lipids, sweat, and water. If you go gung-ho and try to reduce and completely strip the skin of these four things, essentially you are reducing the strength of the acid mantle. The less strength the acid mantle has, the more likely you are going to cause damage to the actual skin. The more likely the client is going to experience and see negative effects from that reduction in the acid mantle. The acid mantle is our friend. Oil, sebum, lipids, sweat, water, all of those things exist on the surface of our skin to protect us. So although they can be counterproductive when it comes to things like makeup and how our skin looks, it actually really does us a favor in protecting us from outside factors. So the acid mantle is your friend. As an esthetician, I can tell you the way that this is going to show up for you and your clients is you're going to have a clients that come in and they're going to be, oh, my skin is just so oily. I want to reduce the amount of oil that I'm using. And because I'm so oily, that's why I have acne. 9 times out of 10, the reason that the client has acne is because they are using stripping products or drying ingredients. So, not micellar water, I can't think of the name of it. Toners with like acids in them. There's a really popular acne toner that people just absolutely love to use, and I can't think of the name of it. But any product that strips the skin of its natural acid mantle, it reduces the sebum, the lipids, the sweat, and the water. They could actually be drying their skin and forcing it to overproduce these things because the acid mantle is there to protect us. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone still with me?
Yes.
Yes, that makes sense.
Perfect. I mean, I'm sorry, my computer just jumped off. So let me get back to the sharing. Perfect. Okay, so then moving on from that, these components form a hydrolipic film to protect the skin from drying out and from exposure to external factors that could damage it. Hydro means water, lipidic means oil. So a hydrolipidic film provides an oil-water balance on the skin surface. The key here to what you just read is balance. There's no such thing as bad skin. There's no, this is better than that. Someone who's dry is not better than someone who's oily. Someone who's oily is not better than someone who is mixed, has multiple, areas on their face with different types of skin types, right? There's no better. It's all about the balance. So your goal when dealing with any skin that comes to you is figuring out what are they doing at home and what can they do at home to create balance, to create harmony. Once you figure out how to do that, you'll be able to solve a majority of your clients' problems, as well as you will then know how to prevent it from getting worse. So the first step is identifying why, what's out of whack, what's not harmonious, what's not balanced. Then creating a plan to get that balance, because that is going to prevent further damage, right? It's going to prevent further issues. And then the third step is correction of whatever it is the problem was. If you don't do those things in that order, what's going to happen is if they have an issue with their skin, it's not balanced, and you go straight to correction. One, if the correction does work, for example, they have acne scars and you're doing chemical peels, but you're not balancing what's creating the acne, then every time you heal one area, they're just going to scar and have another scar. So never going to see results. You have to first identify where they're out of balance. You then have to create the balance and maintain it to prevent further damage. And then you can work on the correction. The good and the bad news with that is, the good news is that means clients can be clients for life, because the time frame in which it takes to balance the skin, the time frame in which it takes to start the correcting, those things have to be adjusted towards the seasons. They have to be adjusted towards lifestyle. They have to be adjusted towards the environment that the client's in. And those things all change, right? So that's the benefit, is you have a client that can ultimately be your client for life. The downside is clients want correction now. I want to go to my esthetician and I want her to fix every problem that I have accumulated over 32 years of life tomorrow. So your job is having the confidence to explain what's going on to their skin, get them on a regimen that works, teach them consistency, and then continue to play the balance game for the rest of the time that they're your client, while maintaining appropriate expectations, right? That's harder than anything else, maintaining the appropriate expectations. Because now that you know even just the two, sensation and protection, now that you know just those two things, you can correct a lot of things. But maintaining that client expectation is going to be ongoingly difficult, because people want results now. So from there, the acid mantle has an average pH of 5.5. The balanced pH of the skin is important to protect the body from pathogens and to regulate enzymatic functions. Enzymes work for us. Enzymes are our friends. That's why people like to use enzymes in their product, because if we can introduce enzymes into the skin and allow them to work from the outside in as well as the inside out, we're able to benefit the client even more. That's where that correction comes into place. But if the acid mantle is not balanced, if the pH is not balanced, then the products are not going to be allowed to do what it is that they do for the skin. So the acid mantle is part of the skin's natural barrier function. The barrier function is the skin's mechanism that protects us from irritation and intercellular transepidermal water loss. Water loss, I apologize. Both of those are really important words for you to understand. Barrier function, the skin's mechanism that protects us from irritation and intercellular transepidermal water loss. Transepidermal water loss, or TEWL, is the water loss caused by evaporation on the skin surface. Those are two things that we have to look out for, balance, and maintain so that our client is able to have a healthy functioning skin without either losing too much of that water on the surface of the skin or without allowing too much to penetrate through the skin. Lipids are substances that contribute to the barrier function of the epidermis. These lipids are protective oils and are part of the intercellular matrix. The intercellular matrix is the fluid between the epidermal cells, and damage to the barrier layer is cause of many of your skin's problems. So this can include sensitivities, aging, and dehydration. So you have to maintain proper barrier function, which means balancing the transepidermal water loss. You should be losing water, but not to the point where that it exceeds the natural function, while making sure that the lipids protect the intercellular matrix. So remember, I said a few slides back where we talked about clients coming in and they're like, oh, I'm so oily. I hate the oil. I use alcohol wipes and get off the oil. That's how oily I am every day. They're not helping their skin. It's the little things, it's the little behaviors, it's the products that clients use that exaggerate their problem as opposed to focusing on balance. Someone who's oily more than likely needs additional water. They need water, they need products that are water soluble, that are going to introduce water into the body, but they also probably need to increase the amount of water that they're ingesting so that the body can function and not feel the need to create so much oil to make up for the lack of water. The key to understanding skincare is to understand balance. What is the issue? What is out of whack? And how can I, in my services, my products, correct this for the client? The next of the 6 primary functions are going to be heat regulations. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I did want to read through some of it, but I'm not going to spend too much time on heat regulation. Heat regulation, the body's average internal thermostat, is set to 98.6 degrees. When the outside temperature changes, the skin automatically adjusts to warm or cool the body as necessary. The body maintains this thermal regulation through evaporation, perspiration, radiation, and insulation. There are millions of sweat glands that release heat from the body through perspiration to keep us from overheating. We then cool ourselves through evaporation on the skin surface. Blood flow and blood vessel dilation also assist in cooling the body. So a client comes in and they say, I am sweating profusely and it's impacting my day-to-day life. What is it that is out of whack if you are sweating to the point where it's impacting your daily life? Because it shouldn't. The sweating is there to cool or warm the body as necessary. So it should happen. We don't want to stop it from happening, because if we did, we'd create a problem, or even worse of a problem. But there is a reason that that's happening, and we need to figure out what's out of balance. What can we correct either through lifestyle, diet, or product, or even service to correct this heat regulation so that the body is doing its function without it negatively impacting the client's overall life. So the did you know, if you can, write down pores, follicles. I want you to screenshot those. But just as an FYI, sometimes the term pore and follicles are used interchangeably, meaning they're being said as if they're the same thing. Pores, however, are actually tube-like openings for sweat glands on the epidermis, while follicles are tube-like depressions with oil glands attached to them. Some follicles can have hair and others can be hairless. So when the client refers to their pore, they may be actually referring to a follicle. So pores are openings in the skin, so out through the epidermis that allow for sweat to pass through them, while follicles are tube-like depressions from the epidermis in with oil glands attached to them to allow oil to flow through the skin. Pores and follicles are not the same thing. They're two very different structures of the skin. Most of the time they're used interchangeably. The client will say, the pores on my forehead are really, really large. That could be a follicle. It could be a pore. Layman's term, pore follicle. When used interchangeably, just understand the difference between a pore, which is going to be sweat, a follicle, which is going to be oil. We're going to go through the rest of heat regulation real quick, and we'll go through excretion so that we can get through the rest of them. Excretion, the sudoriferous glands, also known as sweat glands, excrete perspiration. Many people believe that sweat detoxifies the body, but less than 1% of the body's detoxification comes through perspiration. Sudoriferous glands serve to protect the body from overheating. The liver and the kidneys do the actual detox work. Heavy sweating can cause a loss of fluids and dehydration, and the loss of mineral balance needed to keep the body functioning optimally. So sweat, just like sebum, is also part of the acid mantle, and the function of these glands are discussed later in the chapter. So the sudoriferous glands are sweat glands. If you don't know, if you're not comfortable with the word sudoriferous, write it down. It's important. It's going to be on your state board. The sudoriferous glands are sweat glands. They make up part of the acid mantle. If you are losing a lot of sweat through a lot of water and minerals through perspiration, sweat, then that can cause loss of fluid, transepidermal water loss. It can cause dehydration. Dehydration can then trigger excess oil production because the body doesn't know the difference between oil and water. So excessive sweating from the sudoriferous glands can trigger dehydration, which can then trigger an excess oil production. It can also trigger a reduction in the mineral balance needed to properly feed the body to have optimal function. So are the clients getting their vitamins and minerals? Are the clients sweating more than they should be? Are the clients replacing those minerals? Someone who just drinks soda and doesn't drink water is not going to have very appealing skin because they're sweating because that's what the body is supposed to do, but they're not replacing that water loss with actual water. They're not replacing it with actual vitamins and minerals. So ultimately, the skin's overall look, it's going to look dull. It's going to look dry. It can even look as if it's like peeling or flaking off. And all of that could be because they're not getting the proper restoration of water, vitamins, and minerals into the skin because their excretion, one of those 6 primary functions, is overactive and it's not being replenished. So sudoriferous glands, also known as sweat glands. Next from here is secretion, sebum. Sebum is an oily substance that protects the surface of the skin and lubricates both the skin and hair. We have sudoriferous glands, which are sweat glands, and now we have sebaceous glands, which are oil glands. Again, this is going to be on your state board. I can't stress that enough. It's going to be on your state board. So sebaceous glands, also known as oil glands, are appendages attached to follicles that produce sebum. These oils keep the skin soft and protected from outside elements. The skin is approximately 50 to 70% water at any given time. So sebum coating the surface of the skin slows down the evaporation of that water. If we didn't have the water, ultimately, if we didn't have the oil, ultimately our skin would be unprotected and losing water at a rate so much higher than we can replenish it. And ultimately we wouldn't survive because we need the water to sustain ourselves. All of these things work in tandem. They all work harmoniously so that we can go through life and survive. The beauty aspect of it, the vanity aspect of it is something that we as humans have incorporated. But ultimately, the sebaceous glands, the sudoriferous glands, the sebum, all of those things exist to keep us alive. So if the appearance of our skin is not ideal, it's not looking its best, something is happening with our body's functions, and our job is to figure out what. So sebum coating the surface of the skin slows down that evaporation of water, also known as the transepidermal water loss, TEWL. And it helps to maintain appropriate water levels in the cells. Our cells need water to survive. Our cells need water to reproduce. If our cells are not surviving and reproducing, we die, period. Skin dies, the other organs shut down, we won't make it. Water, oil, these are all our friends. The more respect we pay to having those things function the way they should, the better our skin's going to look, the better it's going to function. Emotional stress, hormone imbalances can stimulate oil glands to increase the flow of sebum, which can lead to skin problems such as acneic breakouts. It could also negatively impact our day-to-day life because no one wants to walk around with a river of oil on their face. But our job is to figure out, they're overproducing oil. Is it because they're lacking water? Is it because they're experiencing emotional stress? Is there hormone balance that we need to take into account? What products can we use? What services can we use to help maintain the natural production of these things? The next is going to be absorption. And absorption of chemicals, hormones, moisture, and oxygen is necessary for our skin's health. Vitamin D is also synthesized and produced in the skin upon exposure to the sun. Sun exposure is something that we actually need. Although too much sun exposure, especially if the other functions aren't working properly, can prove to be a bad thing, we do need sun exposure because our body needs vitamin D. The absorption process in our skin, the function of our skin absorbing that vitamin D from the sun, then synthesizes it and allows it to create the necessary vitamins and minerals that we need in order to maintain that proper balance. The skin selectively absorbs topical products such as serums and creams through the cells, hair follicles, pores, sebaceous glands. But while absorption is limited, some ingredients with a smaller molecule size can penetrate the skin. The penetration ability of the ingredients is determined by the size of the molecule and other characteristics of the product. So lipid-soluble products will penetrate better. So products that are soluble in lipids will penetrate the skin better. Products that are also smaller in molecule size will penetrate better. So with that in mind, does it make sense why you would apply a serum, which is a much smaller molecule size, before applying a moisturizer? Does that make sense to both of you?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So how likely is it for a serum to penetrate over a moisturizer? You put the moisturizer on, it's there, it's trying to penetrate. How likely is any of the benefits of the serum going to affect your skin if you put it on top of a moisturizer?
It probably won't be absorbed at all.
Probably won't. You're really just putting it on your hands at that point. So that's why the order of product use matters. But you can also take that same thought process and identify why you do certain segments of the facial before other segments. So, quick rundown of the segments of the facial: cleansing, skin analysis, exfoliation, extractions, massage, mask, moisturize, mask, deep treatment, which is typically serum, toner, moisturize, SPF, right? That's the general order of a facial. Does it benefit you to use a serum before you exfoliate? Why or why not? Alex, tell me why it wouldn't benefit you to use a serum on a client's skin before you exfoliate.
Because when you're exfoliating, you're removing like the top dead layer of skin. So if you put a serum on, I think the serum would be more beneficial after the exfoliation because you are removing that dead layer of skin. So then it's easier for it to be penetrated into the skin.
Absolutely, 100% of the time. To me, that makes the most logical sense, right? Based on what I now know about the functions in the layers of the skin, right? I have to clear a path for the product to get into the skin. Otherwise, it's just sitting on top. So when a client tells you, oh, I don't exfoliate weekly or, twice a week, depending on the type of products they use, but they do a mask every day. What is that mask doing for them? Absolutely nothing. So our job is to understand what they're doing and how what they're doing is supposed to benefit the skin. And if their behaviors at home and the behaviors in the treatment that we're about to do will actually allow those products and those behaviors to actually make a difference. So that's why we do things in the order that we do them in a facial. You can mix these things up. Like some things can, change and move orders. For example, some people will do the massage portion before the exfoliation because they don't want to risk the heaviness of the massage product, the larger molecule massage product, reclogging the follicle before they get a chance to nourish the skin. So in those scenarios, you can absolutely kind of change things up in that sense. But it's important for you to make those decisions based on what it is that you're doing and what it is you're trying to accomplish. Are you balancing oil? Are you trying to allow more sweat to get off of the surface of the skin and actually evaporate? Are you trying to make sure there's a clear path for vitamin and nutrients to absorb into the skin? What are you trying to accomplish? Based on what are you trying to correct? Based on the natural functions of the skin. That's what you need. That's how you determine what's going to work best for your client. It's crazy. It's literally already 12 o'clock. So from here, instead of going into the next part, I will leave us to kind of work through that information. Like I said, if you haven't already done this chapter, I encourage you to do it today. That way, a lot of this is still fresh. But next week, we'll do a part 2 to this call where we can then go more into detail to the layers and the layers of the skin itself. So we have just done the 6 primary functions of the skin: sensation, protection, regulation, excretion, secretion, absorption. In part 2 of this Skin Deep call, we're going to explain the functions of each layer of the skin from the deepest to the surface. If you are available and able to jump on that call, please do. This recording is going to go up on the YouTube, so you'll be able to rewatch it again. And for those rewatching it now to prepare for the next call, the next thing we're going to do is explain the function of each layer of the skin from deepest to surface. So we just talked about the 6 primary functions of the skin. Next, we're going to talk about the function of each layer of the skin from deepest to surface. In order to do that, we have to identify the layers of the skin. If you did not screenshot like I recommended or take notes, when you watch the replay, feel free to go back through, take those notes, study those vocabulary words, make yourself comfortable with them. It's a good time to go through, do the chapter, take the final exam, because a lot of what we just went over is going to be on your state board. So before I leave you, does anyone have any questions on anything we just talked about?
No.
Perfect.
No.
What I will do is I will leave you now in this call, and then keep an eye out in the app. Part 2 of this call will happen most likely, I'm going to